I am an officer of the elite. I have the blood of Prussian nobility in my veins. I do not, under any circumstances, walk with peasants.
Those were the exact venomous words spoken by a captured SS colonel in the spring of 1945. He wasn't speaking to a low-ranking guard. He wasn't yelling in a panic. He was standing perfectly straight, his black leather trench coat immaculate, his chin raised in absolute defiance, looking directly at the commanders of the United States Third Army. The American GIs had just captured him, along with hundreds of his starving, freezing enlisted men. The standard procedure was to line them all up and march them to a prisoner of war camp in the rear. But this colonel refused to move. He demanded a private staff car. He demanded a military escort befitting his rank. He looked at the young, exhausted American soldiers holding M1 Garands, and he looked at his own wounded, bleeding German conscripts, and he classified them all as exactly the same thing: inferior, unwashed peasants. He believed that his aristocratic status and his high rank in the Nazi regime made him untouchable. He thought he was playing a brilliant game of psychological chess. He thought he could use the American adherence to the rules of war to maintain his arrogant superiority, even in defeat. But he made one fatal, catastrophic miscalculation. The man who walked into the command tent to handle the situation was General George S. Patton. And Patton was about to show him that true justice doesn't always come from the barrel of a gun. Sometimes it comes at the end of a chain. Before we completely break down this incredible, forgotten psychological chess match, I need you to do something. If you want the raw, unfiltered, and deeply human truth of the men who shaped our world, hit that subscribe button right now. We do not do sanitized, polite textbook summaries here. We look at the brutal intellectual warfare that happens when two completely opposed ideologies lock eyes in a closed room. Now let us analyze the board. To understand why this specific standoff is so legendary, you have to understand the absolute toxicity of the mind that Patton was dealing with. This SS colonel was not just a military commander. He was a product of a very specific, deeply ingrained aristocratic class system. According to the extensive research of military historians who have studied the German high command during the Second World War, many of the upper echelon officers came from families who had held power for centuries. They were indoctrinated from birth to believe that they were genetically and intellectually superior to the working class men they commanded. By 1945, the physical war for Germany was entirely lost. The Third Reich was collapsing under the massive, grinding weight of Soviet artillery from the east and American armor from the west. For an elite SS officer captured alive, survival meant immediately shifting the battlefield from physical combat to psychological manipulation. The colonel knew he was defeated militarily, but he refused to be defeated socially. He needed leverage. He needed to prove that even as a prisoner, he was still the master of the men around him. When the American troops ordered him to fall in line with the rest of the captured German soldiers for the long march to the holding pens, he coldly refused. He cited the Geneva Convention. He cited the protocols of officer treatment. He stated that forcing a man of his aristocratic breeding and high military rank to walk in the mud alongside common farm boys and factory workers was a violation of international law. It was an insult to his dignity. Here is the first question I have for you. If you were the American commanding officer on the ground, and a captured enemy demanded special treatment based on his noble blood, while his own men were bleeding in the dirt, how would you react? Would you follow the exact letter of the law to avoid a political incident, or would you throw the rule book away? Type the word rules in the comments if you would give him the car, or type the word mud if you would force him into the line. Let us see how you would handle this psychological trap. The American guards were furious. Their knuckles were white as they gripped their rifles. They had just fought through hell to capture this man. They had watched their own friends die, and now this pristine, arrogant Nazi was demanding a chauffeur. But they held their fire because they operated under a code of conduct. They sent word up the chain of command, and the message eventually reached General Patton. When Patton arrived at the holding area, the atmosphere immediately shifted. Patton did not storm out of his jeep screaming. He did not wave his ivory-handled revolvers in the air. As we have discussed in previous videos, Patton was a master of psychological dominance. He understood that when an arrogant enemy expects you to lose your temper, the most terrifying thing you can do is remain absolutely, chillingly calm. Patton walked up to the SS colonel. The visual contrast between the two men was striking. The German officer stood rigid, his uniform perfectly tailored, a mocking smirk playing on the edge of his lips. Patton stood before him wearing his polished helmet, but his face was weathered, hard and calculating. The SS colonel spoke perfect English. He attempted to establish a bizarre sort of class solidarity with Patton. He looked at the American general and essentially said, "You and I are men of status. We are commanders. We understand that the natural order of the world separates the elite from the masses. You cannot possibly expect me to march in the filth with these commoners. It degrades us both." This was the colonel's opening move. He was trying to trap Patton in a logical corner. If Patton forced him to walk, the colonel would claim the Americans were barbaric and uncivilized, violating the very laws they claimed to fight for. If Patton gave him a vehicle, the colonel won. He would retain his elite status, proving that the Nazi hierarchy was respected even by the conquerors. It was a brilliant, highly manipulative psychological snare. But Patton saw right through it. According to the personal diaries and letters compiled in The Patton Papers by Martin Blumenson, Patton possessed a deeply philosophical, almost ancient view of warfare and leadership. To Patton, rank was not a privilege granted by bloodline or political connections. It was a heavy, sacred burden earned through sacrifice. Patton believed that a true officer bleeds with his men. A true commander eats last, sleeps last, and suffers the same exact hardships as the lowest-ranking private in his army. Therefore, when Patton looked at this SS colonel, he didn't see a fellow military professional. He saw a parasite. He saw a man who had gladly sent thousands of working-class teenagers to their deaths, but who now believed he was too good to get his boots dirty walking alongside the survivors. Patton did not argue with the man's logic. He didn't debate the Geneva Convention. He simply stared at the colonel with eyes that were as cold and unforgiving as winter steel. He analyzed the man's ego, found the central pillar holding it up, and decided to shatter it into a million pieces. Patton stepped closer, invading the colonel's personal space. He spoke in a low, gravelly voice that carried a weight heavier than any artillery shell. "You refuse to walk with the enlisted men," Patton said, summarizing the German's demand. "You believe that marching alongside human beings of a lower social class is a violation of your dignity. You believe you are too elite to share the road with peasants." The colonel nodded, a smug look of satisfaction crossing his face. He thought Patton was agreeing with him. He thought he had successfully manipulated the American commander. "Very well," Patton whispered. "I will not force you to walk with the peasants." Patton turned to his aides and issued an order that completely caught everyone, including the American guards, entirely off guard. He didn't order a staff car. He didn't order a jeep. He pointed toward the logistics staging area at the edge of the camp, where the Third Army kept its supply animals. Patton ordered his men to bring him a mule, not a horse, not a cavalry mount, a stubborn, dirty, foul-smelling supply mule used for carrying heavy crates of ammunition and rations through the deepest, thickest mud of the European theater. When the bewildered American GIs brought the large, braying animal over to the command post, the SS colonel looked at it in utter confusion. He looked back at Patton, the smirk finally sliding off his face. "You are absolutely right, Colonel," Patton said, his voice dripping with venomous sarcasm. "A man of your supreme breeding and aristocratic blood should not be forced to walk with common human beings. Therefore, you will not walk with them. You will walk behind this mule, I want you to pause and think about the absolute genius of this move. If you have ever dealt with a deeply arrogant, narcissistic person who thinks they are better than everyone else, you know that arguing with them is useless. You have to attack their pride. Type the word checkmate in the comments if you think Patton just delivered the ultimate psychological death blow, or type harsh if you think this was crossing a line. Let us know your thoughts on this strategy. Patton didn't just tell him to walk near the animal. He ordered his military police to take a heavy steel chain and secure the SS colonel's handcuffed wrists directly to the leather harness at the rear of the supply mule. The psychological destruction was instantaneous and absolute. The SS colonel began to panic. His perfectly constructed facade of aristocratic superiority completely collapsed. He began to shout. He began to demand his rights as an officer. He begged to be placed back in the line with the common soldiers. He realized that Patton hadn't just denied his request. Patton had found a loophole that completely stripped him of his humanity. By chaining him to a beast of burden, Patton was sending a clear, undeniable message to everyone watching. This man is not a commander. This man is not an elite aristocrat. This man is cargo. Patton ignored the shouting. He stood perfectly still, his arms crossed over his chest, watching with cold satisfaction as the military police secured the chain. "You didn't want to be treated like a regular soldier," Patton reportedly told him as the mule shifted restlessly in the mud. "So I am treating you exactly like what you are, a stubborn, useless piece of baggage. You will follow the rear of the animal. If the animal stops, you stop. If the animal walks through the mud, you walk through the mud. And if you complain, you will answer to the mule." With a sharp slap to the mule's hindquarters from an American GI, the animal began to walk. The heavy chain snapped taut, jerking the SS colonel forward. The man stumbled, his polished leather boots sinking deep into the freezing, filthy sludge of the road. The scene that followed was one of the most profound moments of moral justice witnessed in the entire European campaign. The long column of captured German POWs began their march. These were the peasants the colonel had despised. As they walked, they looked back and saw their elite, untouchable commander, the man who had ordered them to fight to the death while he stayed in warm bunkers, chained to the backside of an American supply mule, slipping and sliding in the dirt, completely powerless. The American GIs marching alongside the column didn't have to say a word. They didn't have to point their rifles or shout insults. The humiliation was so complete, so perfectly tailored to the arrogance of the victim, that the silence was deafening. Every time the mule stopped to relieve itself, the colonel was forced to stop right behind it. Every time the mule dragged a heavy cart through a deep, muddy rut, the colonel was dragged through the exact same rut. His pristine black trench coat was soon covered in thick, freezing brown sludge. This was Patton's true brilliance as a battlefield commander. He understood that you cannot defeat a toxic ideology just by shooting at it. Bullets kill men, but they do not kill ideas. If Patton had ordered a firing squad to execute the colonel for his arrogance, it would have turned the man into a martyr. The other German soldiers would have remembered him as a man who stood up to the Americans and died for his beliefs. But by chaining him to a mule, Patton turned him into a pathetic laughingstock. He stripped away the terrifying aura of the SS and revealed the cowardly, arrogant reality underneath. He proved to the German conscripts that their so-called master race elite were nothing more than fragile egos hiding behind fancy uniforms. The psychological ripple effect of this event was massive. According to accounts from Third Army veterans, the story of the Mule colonel spread through the American ranks like wildfire. It was an incredible injection of pure morale. The young American boys who had been fighting for months in the freezing cold, watching their friends die, finally saw a moment of absolute, undeniable karma. They saw their commanding general use his supreme authority not to play politics, but to defend the dignity of the common soldier. Patton showed his men that in the United States Army, no one, absolutely no one, was above the mud. We look back at this story today not just as an entertaining footnote of the Second World War, but as a profound masterclass in the nature of leadership, ego, and true justice. It is incredibly easy for people in positions of power to begin believing their own hype. It is easy for leaders to look down from their comfortable offices and view the people doing the actual work as peasants. The SS colonel made the mistake of confusing his rank with his value as a human being. He thought the rules of society existed to protect his comfort, rather than to enforce fairness. George S. Patton, despite all his massive personal flaws, his legendary temper tantrums, and his controversial political statements, understood the fundamental truth of the warrior code. He knew that respect is not demanded by a piece of metal on your collar. It is earned by your willingness to suffer alongside the people you lead. When Patton looked at that SS colonel, he didn't just see an enemy combatant. He saw the exact opposite of everything he believed a military officer should be. He saw a man who wanted the glory of command without the burden of sacrifice, and by forcing that man to walk behind a supply mule, Patton permanently corrected the moral balance of the universe on that small, muddy stretch of road in 1945. He proved that dignity is not something you are born with. It is something you prove you have when everything else is stripped away. As we reach the end of this unbelievable intellectual chess match, I want to hear your final verdict. Do you believe that psychological humiliation is a valid tactic to break the arrogance of a tyrannical enemy? Or do you think commanders should always maintain strict, emotionless professionalism? Type the word "broken" in the comments if you think Patton delivered exactly what the colonel deserved. We read every single comment, and this debate gets to the very core of what we consider justice in wartime. Thank you for joining us today on WW2 Rebound as we dig past the sterilized propaganda, the polite history books, and the polished myths to find the raw, beating heart of true history. These are the intense stories of psychological warfare, brutal karma, and the unforgiving reality of the human condition that you will never see anywhere else. If you want to keep exploring the intense, unfiltered truths of the men and women who lived through the world's greatest conflicts, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications right now. Your support is the absolute only reason we can keep breaking down these incredible historical walls and bringing these legends back to life. We have many more intense, deeply human stories from the shadows of history currently in production, and we do not want you to miss a single second of the action. Stay curious, stay objective, and always remember that in the great chess match of life, the most dangerous moves are the ones you never see coming. We will see you in the next video. Stay strong,